Hello, can you hear me as well? The sound's coming through okay. So I'm talking just to see if sound comes through, blah, 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 blah. Let's mix this paint up a bit more. We'll do it up here for the top cam. Here I'm going to use some Citadel Calgar blue layer for the walls as I continue to paint the Uber Dice Tower. I've done a little bit of work on it since I was last online. Specifically, did some work on this forward part, which is straw, and I'm actually pretty happy with the dirty yellow straw effect I came up with there. I might still go back and do a little bit of dry brushing of some additional black on there just to give it a third layer of texture. Alright, my sound does not seem to be coming through, so let me see what I can do about that. Oh. Why is sound not coming through? Okay, can you hear me now? Is this better sound? Apparently, folks could hear me, but only just barely. And there's a little bit of time lag here, so I'm waiting for a response. I'll go ahead and start painting a little bit while we're waiting. Hopefully the sound is better now. Okay, I got confirmation. Good. So, one of the changes to my desk from before is that I've added a second camera here. So we now have two angles to see my projects as I work on them. And apparently when I added the second camera, it also disabled sound from one, and I had explicitly set up a new sound source. So I am still learning OBS as I go, because that's what this all is. Life is just about learning, in my opinion. And I happen to be right, but, you know, not everyone agrees with me, clearly. The universe would be a happier place if everyone agreed with me. Mainly because I don't like to see people unhappy. I think happiness and the pursuit of happiness should be important for everybody. I think that was one point of wisdom with the American Founding Fathers when they discussed the pursuit of happiness. And I think anyone that opposes any group of people based on religion, skin color, gender, anything else, if you prevent people from pursuing happiness, that is un-American in my book. I'm doing a messy job here, but that's what touch-up is for later. And these beams need a lot of touch-up anyway. So I missed a few weeks of streaming, and I should probably address that. It was because I was using a little wimpy old Windows box with only 4 gigs of RAM, but it seemed to, be doing fine as far as OBS was concerned for my simple little setup. And then it wouldn't. OBS updated, and after that update, it just would not load on that old little anemic box anymore, which is not shocking. Oh, but I had hoped for it to stay around a little bit longer. So I have now improvised, and instead of having a dedicated box here, which I kind of preferred for OBS, I am moving a laptop here periodically. However, it does have the advantage of having more ports open than that little old machine did. And I have found, buried away in my stuff, this additional webcam that I got as a freebie with a PC at one point, and then just kind of tossed it away and didn't think about it. But I never actually toss things away. I keep all kinds of cables and stuff for the future. But I ran into it and thought, it may not be a great webcam, but it may do just fine for a secondary view at my desk. So we're trying that out here. And so far, I'm kind of digging it. I like having the separate angle. Feel free to give me feedback in chat about what you think. Dun, 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 dun. We're just going to paint blue, blue, blue. So my newsletter is coming out today for the Resilience, which I've recently retitled Armitage's Den. I'll give you a little bit of a peek preview of what you'll see in there if you're also subscribed. If you're not, hint, you should be. I talk a little bit about story that we are publishing today that we had previously serialized on Substack. Again, if you're not subscribed to Substack, you should be. And it is not a romance erotica piece. It is coming out from my alter ego, Liam Armitage, and it is part of the Dayfall universe, a slightly darker version of the world. It is my own vision of things, but if you are a fan of contemporary, weird sci-fi and fantasy, then some of it may be up your alley. We have an unpublished work, First Date, also set in this universe, that I'm currently working on a short sequel to called Rites of Passage. Working title, may not be its final title. And included in the newsletter is a short fiction piece, the intro to an unpublished story, that features more characters that you will meet with the protagonist of Time is Dying later. I've also wrapped up the initial draft of Cuddle, a sequel to Fuck, and discussed that a little bit. That is an erotica piece, or at least the sequel to an erotica piece. There's actually no sex in Cuddle. And it's a little more complicated than because it's about cuddling. And I've been challenged to write a sequel to it, just as I was challenged to write a sequel to Fuck, entitled Love, which I think I will. Don't know when that'll come out, but I will work on it. Other things proceed apace. I'm continuing to work on Rat Catchers. Not real quick right now. I'm not producing at the speed I would like to, but I am still putting it out at least a chapter a week, usually 2. Try to go for 3. This week they go into a walled city within Almadra, a city within a city, going to look for a talisman artifact. Just got blue on my fingers. This always happens. I need to get in there on the inside, and that's hard to do. Spent most of my life trying to get inside things. Seriously. Shake up the paint some more. And I'm enjoying this third Ratcatcher story in part because it is Yunji's story, and we get to see things from her point of view. Let's paint the little tip up here blue. Nice and happy little blue. Kind of like happy trees, except happy tops of towers. I'll definitely need another coat, but that's alright. I don't mind a little streaking with this. It is supposed to be a slightly worn building. And things like... There again, I touched it again. Jesus. I'll be definitely doing some wash here to make the brick darker and show sediment in between the bricks. Alright. Let's keep painting. We'll be applying a wash to parts here where it's cracked as well, like here. Because you definitely want the effect of that depth on there. But I don't want it to look too grimy and dark. You want a balancing effect. And other writing news, well, there's just a lot going on in general. I am continuing to work on my RPG to support my written works. It is primarily inspired by the Dayfall and Rail universes to support high fantasy and gothic horror, including Lovecraftian stories. but it is usable for any setting, and I will include rules for my Dayrise universe, where Pool Girl and other more lighthearted things are set, including Neighborly Gesture series, 1000 Cranes, and so on. And in fact, I am writing a story right now that I'm about halfway done with that is adjacent to Neighborly Gestures, as you get to meet the person who runs the gaming shop that is mentioned briefly in the Thanksgiving episode of Neighborly Gestures. And you even see for just a brief minute Harley after she has had her and Adam's son, Ozzy. No Shannon, though. And yes, that will be another adult story like Neighborly Gestures, although with entirely new characters this time. So I continue to put the blue on here. I really look forward to when I can start doing the real detail cleanup on this. That will be nice. I really have not put that much total time onto this project yet, but because it's been spaced out among my streams, it feels like it's been a really long time, even though the actual amount of hours spent has been pretty small. Again, I'm not worrying about getting everything perfect. I'm not worrying if I make a few mistakes. That will get followed up on with much more precise brushwork to do fixing later. And I usually try to prepare a few sort of topics to talk about while I paint. I have to admit, I did not really do that this week. As it is, I missed a couple weeks while dealing with getting computers reset up and just life being busy and that kind of stuff, you know. And ideally, to do this, I need to be able to sit down and just have it running very quickly, which I think I'm back to. So I'm happy about that. And I'll prepare more topics for discussion next week. But one thing I wanted to talk about today a little bit was dice. And that may sound like a strange thing for a writer to talk about, but I have always been fascinated by the interplay of role-playing games and stories. Now, the intersection is almost notorious in some ways. Everybody has horror stories of playing tabletop RPGs with a DM, GM, storyteller, whatever you want to call them, who really is writing their own personal novel rather than doing an interactive work with the players. And that's not what I'm talking about. If you want to write a novel, go write a novel. Have fun. I've done it. I continue to work on books. I love it. I'm not going to tell anybody not to. I think being creative is one of the highest things that humanity can aspire to. And it doesn't have to be good. Just make something. And I think anytime people play a tabletop RPG, they are making something. There is a collaborative, creative experience at play. And at its most pure form, a role-playing game can be little kids playing cowboys and Indians. Or cops and robbers. Cowboys and Indians is probably not a politically correct thing to say anymore, but it's what they said a lot when I was a kid, and what early RPGs often used as an example. Calvin Ball from the Calvin and Hobbes cartoon strips is pure imagination as game. They improv the rules and make the rules up as they play. But most people want some sort of structure for their games. They want a common understanding between the different participants, which would have prevented some fights between Calvin and Hobbes if that had existed in Calvin Ball. And so we have rules. Now, the interesting thing about rules is once you create rules, it stops being a pure improv storytelling experience because you start putting this arbitrary structure around it. Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes limitations lead to the best creativity. But it also means that not everybody involved in the game may have a slightly different perspective about... Hold on one second. There we go. Sorry, I had forgotten to plug the laptop in, and it was about to shut down. It means that different people involved in the experience may have different interpretations about what they want out of the game as an experience. Some may be less inclined towards the storytelling, and others more towards, quote-unquote, winning the game, and focus, or have more interest in things like tactical combat elements. So different game systems have evolved to cater to these different desires. I had for a long time been interested heavily in using Pathfinder 2 to model my Rheolian games because it has a player base I love. I do like the tactical combat ability of it. But I found as I was working on it, I just got increasingly frustrated with where it was not what I call player-friendly or story-friendly. You really had to work against the rules to make things happen for the story. And I'd been pondering this for a long time when I went out with my daughter to play a game of Call of Cthulhu at the local game store. I'm going to put this aside for now. The paint is still wet. And it's going to need some time to dry before I can handle the other sides of it to get the front here. So we're going to just wash my brush, put the paint aside, and put this aside to dry some. Alright. So, whoop, you can see the blue on my hand. Dice. So I brought some dice here, just to talk about dice. If you're familiar with things like D&D, you're going to be very familiar with this kind of D20 die. Some people prefer dice as the singular and plural. I say they're wrong. Die is the singular. And D&D, Pathfinder, a whole bunch of other systems, some of which are derived from D&D or Pathfinder, use this D20. And what this means is that when you set a target number, like an armor class or something else against a D20, you're always moving in increments of 5%. Even if you do something like rolling with advantage, where you roll it twice and take the better, ultimately, you're still moving in increments of 5%. It's certainly not the only system out there. There is also dice pool systems. Let me open up this bag of Wraith dice. And so you have a bunch of D10s. And you can set a target number and see how many roll above that, based on the pool you have. You can also have rules about you roll a 10 and that's hot and you roll it again. But ultimately, you're still doing a probability, a percentage. This is still ultimately a percentage. Now, Call of Cthulhu lets you do percentile. So 6, 7, let's roll it. Okay, a 40 and a 5. So that's a 45. So if you have a skill of, above or below a certain level, you get it. But it's ultimately all percentages. Now, people will talk about, the curvature of the dice. There's a bunch of BS about it. Truthfully, why do a lot of people, including myself, like dice pool games? Because we love rolling a whole bunch of dice at once. That's just the reality. It's nothing you can't do with this or with percentile. Percentile being even more accurate. But a lot of these games still aren't what I call storyteller friendly. They are very focused on how their mechanics work. And the more I thought about it, the more I decided I wanted to move things towards a system where its mechanical decisions were all oriented about making it easy to tell a story. And that game is Fate. And these are Fate dice. Now, these are kind of the fancy Fate dice. Because what they have is they have 2 pluses, 2 negatives, and 2 neutrals. And you roll 4 of them for a test. And what this does mathematically is that these will come out on average to no result. Because they're total in here, 8 pluses, 8 minuses, 8 neutrals. And if you have a skill of, let's say, +4 in Fate, and let's just say the +4 is for driving fancy, then on average you will get a result of 4. Now, there are other things in Fate you can do to get bonuses to your roll and make special circumstances to give yourself an advantage, but this provides a certain degree of unreliability. You can certainly lose numbers with a bad roll and fail, or get more and get exceptional rolls. But on average, your skill is going to be the dominant determinator. And I'll talk more about Fate at a future point. But this is what I am moving towards for my Rheolian stories, including Ratcatchers, as well as my Dayfall universe, because I want the characters to be preeminent and I want the storytelling to be preeminent. And I don't know if anybody would ever want to play as one of my characters, but I want to give that option available. And I want to give you the option to play in that world. So that's something I've been thinking a lot about recently. Oh, and this is some of my dice stuff in a little bowl here. Fate also uses chips called Fate chips. You can use pennies or whatever you want. By the way, for these, you don't have to use these dice. You can use normal 6-sided dice and just say 1s and 2s are negatives, 3 and 4s are neutral, 5s and 6s are pluses. Works fine. You can even grab some and paint them up if you want to create that effect. So as I publish Ratcatchers, I'll be showing more and more content where I am putting together the Fate rules for these characters, which I'm having a lot of fun with. It's an interesting mechanical challenge. Excuse me while I look at reconstructing a broken Storm Strider that my cat knocked over. Thank you, cat. That's what I get for leaving it in a public space. But maybe I'll put it together next week. I think that's all my thoughts for today. I wanted to make sure that the new laptop was working with the stream. I wanted to make sure that the new camera angle is working, which I think looks great. And I probably should do more with my overlay in the future, adding, like links to the Substack and stuff. But that will come later. For now, thank you for joining me. Bye.